Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk, 888-589-8840. Going to get to the phones here in just a quick second. Want to play one more soundbite with regard to Ted Cruz. This is on the Morning Joe program. They've got fake conservatives on there all over the place. Joe Scarborough fancies himself as a conservative, but he's not. So you can tell when you got the left and moderate Republicans, Republicans in name only, going after a guy, you know that that's the guy to watch. They're not going after Rubio. They're not going after Mitch McConnell. They are. They're not going after anybody else. They're going after Ted Cruz. I mean, it's lights out going after Ted Cruz. That tells you he's the man. The left and moderate Republicans will always tell you who the ones that we are to back. I mean, if we just listen to them, they will pick our candidates for us. Just look at who frightens them the most, who wigs them out, who freaks them out, who they try to destroy, who they try to annihilate with innuendo, assassination. That's the guy. And Ted Cruz is the guy. He is the man. So here is the fake conservative Joe Scarborough. He's even going after Ted Cruz on MSNBC. Let's listen.
That's a smart move by the young senator, and I encourage him to continue.
Well,
to misrepresent what people say inside of. I mean, he's lying.
That's the key. Exactly.
He's lying about what Republican senators were saying in those meetings. Right. He's exaggerating.
Right.
But, you know, he's not lying about Democrats. He's lying about his own party. Jonathan Capehart, Ted Cruz, not most likely to win Miss Hospitality this year.
Oh, no, the guy's only been in office since January, and if there's bipartisan agreement on Capitol Hill, it's that Senator Cruz is a bit of a jerk. Well, maybe not a bit of a jerk. He is a jerk. The Democrats don't like him, but Republicans really can't stand him.
You know what that means? Ted Cruz is the man. And speaking of racism in the Democratic Party, one last clip 7, then we'll go right to the phones. Brzezinski on the same Morning Joe program. This was from yesterday, actually. And Joe Scarborough was bringing up what Dick Harpootlian, the racist head of the Democratic Party in South Carolina, had said about Nikki Haley. Not only did he say we want to send her back to where she came from, referring to her country of origin, but he said last summer at the Democratic National Convention that she was like Eva Braun. He compared her to Eva Braun, who was Hitler's mistress. So he was making a Nazi comparison with Nikki Haley. And, of course, the Democrats always say you can't do that. That's horrible, no good, very bad to make any kind of Nazi comparisons. And, of course, they do it all the time to us. So as far as I'm concerned, that's fair game. If that's an analogy they feel free to use when they think the shoe fits, we have exactly the same freedom if we believe the shoe fits. Anyway, here is, and you'll notice, Joe Scarborough tries to bring up this thing about Eva Braun, that Nazi analogy, that Hitler analogy, and Mika Brzezinski, very, very nervous, wanting to try to protect her buddies in the Democratic Party, trying to protect her fellow well, I'm not saying Mika Brzezinski's a racist, I don't know that, but Dick Harpootlian's a racist, and here's a fellow liberal trying to protect her liberal racist buddy. Let's listen.
Speaking of South Carolina really quickly, you guys talked about that clown that runs the Democratic Party down there, right?
Yes, we did for quite some time. Former clown.
Did he step down?
Yeah, no, he fully apologized.
How did he step down?
He's stepping down.
But he fully apologized because he wasn't going to apologize.
He apologized.
He called Nikki Haley Hitler's mistress first.
Yeah, we don't need to repeat it. It's also stupid.
Hitler's mistress, and then I'm wondering why it took so long. Anyway,
because he's not very quick.
Yeah.
We don't need to repeat that, but we can't stop talking about Mitt Romney's dog on the top of his car. Can't stop talking about the employee's wife got cancer. Can't stop talking about the 47% tape. But you can't mention Dick Harpootlian making a Nazi analogy about Nikki Haley twice. That is over the...
I totally feel bad, though, because you're on a new subject, which is really important also, because Ted Cruz is great. And unfortunately, what you've been talking about is exactly, that's always the enemy's plan, is divide and conquer.
Yes.
I was actually commenting on the previous section you guys were doing in terms of, what does the church do in grounds of in cases of divorce. And adults so often act as if, well, each person has their side. Well, as believers, we should never pick his side or her side. We should pick God's side, period, because he's watching, and so are the kids.
Yes.
I have 4, and the hardest thing for me has been watching. My ex-wife chose to divorce me. She stays in a relationship outside of the marriage, and I still wear the wedding ring because I'm in a covenant that was between me and her, but also with God. And yet my kids go to a Christian school, and so many people that are professing believers are in friendship and relationship when God's word, whether it's Paul, John, Peter, Jesus, say, don't have fellowship, don't spend time, because at the end of the day, you're not showing love and kindness, but you're perpetuating the deception, and the kids are watching.
Yeah, well, and not only are the kids watching, Monty, they're being damaged by what's happening. That was the Melanie Phillips was making in her piece. I started seeing that what conservatives were saying is right, that marriage is a sacred institution, that we need to do everything in our power to keep the families together, that absentee fathers are destroying the lives of our children, their academic performance, their emotional well-being, their ability to succeed in life, their ability to form lasting relationships of their own. All of those things are put at risk when you have marriages and families breaking up. And if anybody ought to be caring about kids and about victims of divorce, it ought to be the church. Instead, they seem to be catering to people that want to initiate divorce, don't have biblical grounds to do it. And let me ask you this, Monty. I'm just grieved to hear about your story. That's a terrible thing. My folks went through a divorce when I was an adult, and it just shattered the foundations of my life. I mean, it rocked me to the roots. There's never an age when children are old enough to go through the trauma of a divorce. But let me ask you this, Monty. Your wife and her, is she married to the other guy, or are they just dating?
No, she's not. And actually, it's kind of a double life. But that's not. I don't want to talk about that part of it.
Yeah, but here's my only question is she going to a church where they are allowing her to fellowship there with no questions?
Absolutely, and that's the biggest problem. Is I graduated from Dallas Theological Seminary. I didn't become a believer until I was 28, and you can't do anything when it's a mega church, when there's thousands of people that go on a Sunday. You can't do anything with who's just attending. But if people are in leadership who know, when you've kind of tried to do a Matthew 18 and 3 couples came alongside her, said turn from this, she chose not to. I followed the 1 Corinthians part. Okay, now I treat her as a non-believer. If she's willing to stay in the marriage, I stayed. Then I got served divorce papers about a year later. But I had to go in front of a secular judge and a professing believer who was leading a care group in their home, stood in front of that secular judge and said that she should be primary over the kids. Yeah. And I was astounded by that.
I mean, it is.
Luckily, the judge just kind of looked at the facts and said, okay, man, you need to move out. So, the Lord provided, but it grieves me because now I sit and I'm like, okay, defending myself is not ever the point, but what does grieve me is that professing believers are like, okay, well, the divorce is final. It was final a year ago, and so now whatever the people do, it doesn't matter. Well, you know what? I've got twins that are about to be 16, a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old, and their little lives are watching.
Yeah,
and it doesn't matter.
Well, and I agree with you, Monty, that it's a failure in the church. I remember, and there's a limit to what one church can do. I remember I had a guy come into my church, and the family came to the church, and he left his wife to hook up with somebody else, and I confronted him about it after a service one time, and I said, "Look, I understand, that you've left your wife and that you're in another relationship." And he said, yeah, and he was coming to church. He was there in church the next Sunday. And I said, well, you're not going to be able to keep coming here. You can't worship here until you deal with that and deal with that sin and go back home to your wife and to your family. I'm not going to be able to let you keep worshiping here. We can't have that dynamic come into this church body. And so he left. I mean, he said, okay, well, I'm not coming here anymore then. And I heard kind of through the grapevine, I didn't track him down, but I heard where he went to church. And so I called the pastor of that church and I said, look, I'm not telling you what to do. I just think there's information here that you need to have about what he did with that information, because I didn't follow up. It wasn't any of my business. And I don't know if they, oftentimes they will just throw open their arms and, churches will say, look, we're not legalistic and judgmental like that guy over there. We'll embrace you in. We know that people have their foibles and they have their imperfections, and you're welcome here. You've got a home here. We're all sinners and all that kind of stuff. And just sort of cooperate with the meltdown of the nuclear family. And, I just wonder, Monty, I'll give you the last word here, but it seems like, maybe we've kind of put a finger on a nerve here just based on some of the calls that we've gotten today. Maybe this issue of the way the church is dealing with divorce is maybe a much bigger issue than we thought.
Yeah, I mean, what's so hard is, if people that are, in the role of pastor know and they see him attending and they know they were, part of, the confrontation, the Matthew 18, and yet they're showing up and they don't deal with it, I think it sends such a mixed message.
Yes, it does.
Although it was DC Talk that quoted it, was C.S. Lewis that said it, but, the single greatest cause of atheism in the world today is people who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, yet walk out the door and deny him by their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable.
Well, and you think, Monty, too, about the impact of people in the church, because Paul's admonition in 1 Corinthians is a little bit of leaven leavens the whole lump. That's why you have to remove the wicked man, he says, from your midst, because there's something he's bringing with him that's going to permeate, your whole church. And what happens then, Monty, is if people are contemplating a divorce, maybe they're in a challenging marriage, and they're thinking about leaving their partner, and they see that it happened over here to this couple. She left, and the church didn't do anything. She's happy as a clam. She's coming. She's involved. She's got her boyfriend with her. And the church apparently thinks that that's fine. So maybe it's okay for me to go ahead and break up this relationship, this marriage, and this family. So it just kind of lowers the bar, and then it creates the possibility, the likelihood even more families are going to be damaged and hurt by the institution of divorce. Well, thanks for calling, Monty. God bless you, my friend. I appreciate your time. We'll be back in 2. Stay with us.